So what I'd really like is for you to go automate Orchestrate. Specific tools, you'll need them. Now, orchestration automation tools are usually the ones that you want to use for this, but you don't necessarily need a specific orchestration and automation tool. PowerShell, Python, any other scripting language will facilitate this. In order to support that effort, I have a spreadsheet, which is a list of procedures, which is a really good place to start. About 120 generic procedures that are available for you, separated into functional areas that I use in the SOC class in order to describe what a security operations center needs to do. And what I'll explain during this brief talk, and there's a much longer version of this where I go into a lot more detail and provide a lot more examples. But in this brief talk, I'll explain the rationale for the selection criteria so that you could take this spreadsheet, which is available for download from SOC class website, and make it your own in order to direct and prioritize your orchestration and automation actions. So by way of initial definition, automation is technology where the process or procedure is performed with minimal human intervention. Orchestration is the automated configuration or coordination across multiple different systems. And I'm going to largely use these two terms together because I don't care, for our purposes of accomplishing better security operations, whether you're automating or orchestrating. The point is that you're taking some task which needs to be done and making it more efficient and effective, but you're also selecting the right ones to focus on, where you'll have a high likelihood of success and efficiency and enhancement. And that's exactly what I'm trying to explain to you now, is how to make that selection. So what we're going to talk about here are tasks. And I separate tasks into a couple different areas. You should have definitions about what identification is. And identification is the notion of something might actually be bad, which is then investigated. And that investigation is a verification as to whether it is bad or not. And if it is bad, how bad it is. Analysis is the assessment of what occurred, how it occurred, when it occurred, where it occurred, on what systems, and what exactly the details were for them. Response is intervention in the bad thing, and recovery is data and system resumption back to normal after the bad thing has been intervened or eliminated. So the uses that we have for automation and orchestration is the extraction of related and correlated data. And as an example, one can do enrichment in a non-automated fashion, but enrichment itself can be automated so that it's directly available, or queries are performed on behalf of someone who wants that enrichment data. In terms of the presentation of that information, we can also have this correlation type action. We can have value attributed to a given host based on individuals, and this value is determined by looking into our registry or LDAP or Active Directory, whatever it is, where we can understand where the person is in the hierarchy and what sort of data access they have. An analyst may be actually guided through an investigation, may be guided through response, where the system's presenting to the analyst the things which can be done given the assets which are in play for this particular issue. And that would be an orchestration and an automation type work, guiding an analyst through this. The active collection of assets and data, that would be another opportunity where automation would be really useful. The specific configuration changes which support responsive actions in the midst of an investigation would also be really valuable to orchestrate. The ability to be able to say, contain that host and have the analyst who's directing the system to perform the action, have the analyst not actually need to perform the specific logon to the firewall to change the configuration on the network firewall and the host firewall, on switching the switch port to an alternate VLAN. All of those responsive type actions which you have in your repertoire, you should consider automating those responsive actions so that they can be done quickly. And the decision to contain isn't necessarily the thing that you would automate, but the ability to automate the action of containment is something that's really quite powerful. The paradox of automation is that the more that we automate a system, the less likely a human being will be capable to intervene in that system when that system starts to have problems, because human capability depends on repetition and contact time. And so some really scary examples have occurred in terms of automated systems failing. One example is Qantas Flight 72, the autopilot, and you can go read a lot of details on this, but effectively the autopilot system, which is an automated system to manage flight controls, had an issue, and the pilots had a very difficult time actually regaining control of the plane and had minimal confidence in their control over the plane. So orchestration contraindication comes into play when we're dealing with novel or uncertain circumstances. Trying to tell a computer system how to orchestrate across a large set of computers when we don't actually understand what the right parameters are of performance is not a good time to try to do that orchestration and have the system just go and do the work for us. Another thing that's really interesting in terms of orchestration is that technically we may have the ability to orchestrate, but legally or administratively or driven by policy, we're actually not allowed to do that. And we have to actually step back from our orchestration capabilities because of some restriction, which would make it so that we're not allowed to do that. Another part of this, when I think about a contraindication for orchestration, is the actual performance of analysis. Analysis entails a substantially complex set of actions, and some tasks within that complex set can actually be automated or orchestrated, but the analysis itself is the responsibility of the human being, and it should remain that way, at least for the foreseeable future. In terms of automation, I don't want to automate when I don't have a clearly defined parameter of accuracy or success, or I can't actually program the system, or I can't clearly articulate what not to do. If I can't define success and I don't know when to stop and I don't know what not to do, then I shouldn't be trying to automate that particular thing. But if we have operational tasks that we know need to be done, we can do that automation. If we don't have clear IT operations, then we shouldn't try to automate our security actions based on those IT operations. If we haven't tested things thoroughly, it's not a good candidate for automation. We can move it to a better candidate for automation through thorough testing. So the workflow that you have in your security operations, I hope is already existing. I hope it's clear. I hope it's accurate. And if you have that, and this is an example of a workflow that I have in my SOC class resources that you can download, and I'll show you the link in just a second. But if you have that already, then the effort of orchestration automation is substantially reduced because you've done a lot of the existing work that will allow you to select these candidates. And when we think about these things, when we're selecting what we're going to automate and orchestrate, we need to understand what the inputs to processes are, and then the outputs from that process, and what or who is going to provide that input, and what or who is going to absorb that output. And then we can go and determine what the steps are in the process. We can determine what technology is in use for that process. And if you have this established from a workflow, then you probably can do a very good job in terms of your orchestration and automation. If you don't have this established, that's okay. You can start with a sketch of this, or again, you can download this document, which is a document in addition to the spreadsheet for the task list, but they're related because all the stuff that I do in the SOC class is an architectural system, which is intended to depict the interrelations of actually running a security operations center. And so this workflow for these processes is actually a high-level workflow for the movement of information within your SOC. So the process list that I have in this spreadsheet has a couple of different levels of specificity. Even if you don't end up automating and orchestrating, this is an appropriate thing to provide in terms of guidance to your analysts. If I tell you that you must follow these exact steps, I really mean it. Follow the steps exactly. And if you think that you need to deviate from those steps, well, there's a mechanism for you to indicate that you're deviating, but indication of deviation from a procedure which has exact steps to follow requires authorization. Okay? And I talk about this in other places. So I want to look for circumstances in the tasks and procedures that I have where I'm leaning already toward having exact steps to follow because of some circumstance of errors that were made in the past or issues that we encountered, or we have an agreement with some constituent. I'd call the people who are serviced by the Security Operations Center the constituents. You might call them customers, you might call them some other term, but I use that constituent term most of the time. And so for this, I'm looking for candidates which accomplish the highest level of prioritization for orchestration and automation by finding the things in my list of procedures of the stuff that I do where I already have exact steps to follow as a mandate, and I end up with doing this particular task or procedure often. Right? That's a really good candidate for my orchestration and automation. And if I do it a lot and I have high degrees of precision requirements, then that's the sort of stuff that I want to orchestrate and automate. And that's the highest level. If I don't do it as much, or if it isn't as important to be accurate, and I know that people hate to hear that, but there are some things which have less importance for accuracy. That's moderate level. In terms of things which don't make a good candidate for orchestration automation, is the stuff where I have general steps, or things where I'm telling the analyst, look, we don't exactly know what's going to happen. You're going to need to figure it out. I want you to use your discretion. You're the incident responder. You're the forensic analyst. You're the network monitoring. You're the monitoring analyst who's on point for this. You figure out the steps to do based on the circumstances and the objectives that you know to be in place for the organization. And where I say that a procedure or process, I actually have a ranking in the spreadsheet of none in terms of candidacy priority for that particular task. None is, I don't want to orchestrate it or automate it. And there's a reason for not doing that. It's when the person performs the effort, there's value derived from that effort. And the learning that occurs in that experience is valuable ultimately to the end objective that I have for why I'm doing the task at all. Okay? And so I want to be able to rank things from highest to none in terms of the things that we do. In order to be able to articulate that, I have taken the liberty of building this spreadsheet. Again, I said about 120 different things. Take it, adjust it, look at your internal structure, change the functional areas that I've assigned to these different groups, list out the things that you do which I have missed. If you're willing to contribute those back to me, I'll incorporate them into the spreadsheet so others can benefit from that. And so here are just a couple examples. And this is notification of constituents related to some sort of a general threat bulletin. I want to do this exactly the same way every time. And that actual communication should be automated. Right? In terms of impact assessment, I actually have an impact assessment mechanism that I use, and it's a larger sort of integration with the steering committee of the SOC and the or whoever suffices to provide you with guidance and business alignment. But that there's not exactly a way to automate that, so I can automate some of the steps, but that's more of a moderate type thing. As an example, my interaction with my human resources team, when there's a circumstance where we need to address a problem, I don't want that automated or orchestrated. I might automate a sub-step in that, but basically that's something that needs to be handled because the circumstances tend to be distinct and unique. Another example of things where I want to automate and orchestrate, validation of receipt of data. Once I've signed on to absorb a certain data set into my SOC, and this might be actually adding it to the SIM, but whatever sort of ingestion of data you're doing, I want to assure in an automated fashion that the data is available to my SOC going forward. And hunting is something that I have some steps, but I want the human beings doing those steps because the overall program of hunting is one where the effort of doing the hunting teaches us stuff. So for me, hunting is something where I don't actually want to orchestrate and automate. So I sincerely appreciate your attention. I hope that this is valuable to you in terms of how I make decisions, what the rationale is. And in addition to that, because I've seen this for lots of people and worked with hundreds of people in terms of their security operations, I'd like to give to you that spreadsheet as a start for your effort of orchestration and automation. Most of the security vendors who I have talked to who provide orchestration and automation tools, when they hear this presentation that I give or other forms of it, they typically say, I wish my customers would listen to this. I wish that my customers understood this coming into it so that they could take our tool and make our tool do exactly what it's supposed to do. And the prevailing and important thing related to this is understanding the tasks that you do before you start to try to orchestrate and automate. So you can go to this soc-class.com/prez for the spreadsheet. The orchestration automation link is there. You get the larger sort of reference for this. The SOC class itself has this and a whole bunch of additional information in terms of use case development, hunting, security operations, design, build, and operations. And this is something that I have attempted to take all of the wisdom that I have around doing security operations and turn it into a system, which is a depiction of an architecture, which would allow you to take that system and deploy it as needed for your environment. And this little spreadsheet is just one of the many artifacts that I have available to support that effort. So I hope that it's beneficial to you.